One of my favorite storylines from the Ahsoka series, and recent Star Wars for that matter, is the rivalry between Sabine Wren and Shin Hati. Their duel on the dark yet beautiful planet of Seatos was one of my favorite scenes from the show, and will serve as the inspiration behind the LEGO Star Wars MOC we're building in this video, so let's get started. Capturing this scene from Season 1, Episode 4 of the Ahsoka series, Fallen Jedi in LEGO, should be a lot of fun. I love the contrast between the red leaves of the trees and the ominous tone of the forest, but recreating such a dark and haunting atmosphere in LEGO could be a challenge. However, thanks to the genius of LEGO MOC builder Ralf Langer, I believe we have the foundation for a tree design that will help create the atmosphere I'm going for. I'm primarily interested in this design for the trunk itself, which uses Technic pin connectors in a curved Technic fin piece. The fin piece provides curvature to the trunk, and its thorn-like design will contribute to the wicked atmosphere. The fin piece also features a hole on its side where we can attach part number 32828, the round plate with a bar. These modified plates will serve as the tree branches where we can connect our leaves. Now, standing on its own, the leaves of this tree do look sparse. However, I'm hoping the forest will be the sum of its parts, and by adding multiple trees, it will feel dense and more populated. And I'm happy with how this design, especially the overall shape, has come together. We'll have a lot of posing options with the tree trunks, and we'll be able to achieve varying tree heights, which I think will contribute to the overall realism of the forest. Now, we need to build and add more trees to better understand how many trees we actually have, and this will help me visualize the size and density of the forest and how big the MOC will be. Okay, so based on what I'm seeing here, a 48 by 48 base will work just fine, which is exactly what I was hoping for. And while I like the density of the trees using this design, I think the forest will look even better once we add another tree style. One issue we might have, which does stand out as I'm looking at it, is the abundance of fins or thorns that I'm seeing. It feels a bit overwhelming, so hopefully they'll blend into the atmosphere of the forest and become less noticeable as we continue to build. That's my intention anyway, for the thorns to be felt in the build more than they're seen, if that makes sense. Alright, moving on, let's add another tree design inspired by SkyGuy365, which also utilizes Technic pieces, specifically the round connectors with slots. The design also incorporates the double pin with an axle hole for stability between the trunks, and while I won't be using his specific leaf design, which is awesome, the trunk itself will provide good variation for the forest. As for the leaf design that we will be using, I'm keeping it simple and inexpensive by combining the large leaf piece with these smaller plant pieces. This design I think does a nice job representing bigger leaf clusters compared to our other tree design, and will add some nice variation to the canopy of the forest. And while the design itself isn't incredibly detailed, remember the forest will be the sum of its parts, and that will hopefully create a cool aesthetic for the overall MOC. And as you can imagine, we're using a lot of dark red in this build, so to help break that up, I'm adding bright red plant pieces to introduce color variation within the leaves. And I've got to say, while definitely smaller than my Endor build, this LEGO Star Wars MOC is starting to feel to me like it has the potential to be something special. There's just, I don't know, I like the color, right? The color palette, and overall I just think it's unique. I just feel like it's going to be unique, so I'm really excited to see how it turns out. Now that we've determined the number and style of trees we're working with, as well as the size of the forest, it's time to start building the base. And for this project, I'm going with a black border, and in keeping with the Berkanics tradition, I'll use lime green bricks for filler. Okay, this looks really satisfying, but I've decided to replace the middle section with reddish brown bricks to represent the bottom layer of the terrain, which is mud. I'll also incorporate some dark green wedges and other plates to simulate grass laying over these patches of mud, which I think will add depth and give our forest floor the effect of being trampled on by the struggle between Sabine and Shin. Now it's time for the fun part. Well, I am excited about the trees, but before we can add those, we need to bring the terrain of Seatos to life by adding those characteristic leaves on the ground. For that, we'll use a base layer of dark red plates as the foundation, and later we can overlay leaf pieces to create additional depth and texture. I'm also adding layers of wedge plates to add some height variation. Another cool addition I'm adding to the landscape is a few rock formations. I'm not planning to have a lot of rock work, but I do want to have a few smaller formations and some other rocks sparsely placed around the forest. The light bluish gray of the stones combined with a few mossy olive green pieces will add some needed color variation. I'm also adding a tree in the middle of these rocks to add some realism to the forest. Overall, the building techniques are pretty straightforward for this LEGO MOC, so it's a lot of fun just to add a small detail like this into the process. Plus, I think it looks pretty cool. Now that we have our first rock formation built, we can continue adding leaves and texture into the landscape. And through some editing magic where time doesn't exist on YouTube, we can fast forward to the finished base layer of terrain. And wow, this dark red texture looks really satisfying. The color palette looks great, the rock formation and trees add a lot to the overall environment, and the scene is almost set for our duel between Sabine and Shin. With the base terrain complete, we can start filling in our forest with trees and adding other elements like rocks, moss, fallen leaves, branches, stumps, and other details. And with the fragile nature of the branches and leaves, I need to start at the back of the build, adding details as I work towards the front, because I won't be able to reach into the forest later without breaking branches. So it's really important that I add as much detail and density as possible to recreate the environment I was hoping for. So let's keep building. When I began gathering pieces for this build, I wondered if bright red would look good or how much I would need, and I'm so glad that I got these bright red leaf pieces. I didn't realize at the time how critical these would be in achieving the color contrast and diversity needed to give the overall landscape life. The different shades of red are essential in providing the trees with their distinctive appearance, otherwise I doubt the build would achieve what I envisioned. Alright, so we're getting close as we're at a very repeatable stage within the build process, but before we fast forward to the final scene and cinematic, I wanted to touch on a point about the forest. When I first saw the trees with fins, I was concerned they might not look natural, which did give me pause and second thoughts on the design. However, I'm glad that I maintained faith that the fins and thorns would blend in and become part of the atmosphere once we added leaves, because now that I'm looking at it, now that our creation is starting to come together, the fins are hardly noticeable and they really do blend into the atmosphere, and the overall curves of these trees really contribute to the dark and wicked mood that I was hoping to create. So, I don't know about you, but I can't wait to see Sabine Wren and Shin Hati clash in this build. I also can't wait to see if we were able to capture the atmosphere, that dark and ominous yet beautiful look of Seatos. So, without further delay, I present to you the duel on Seatos.